Okay, everybody. Well, look, thanks again for joining us tonight. Another Tuesday training here at One Source. Tonight, back by, I guess, back by demand. She did such an amazing job a couple weeks ago when she was here. Catherine is going to do a presentation for us on the power of visualization. And she, as you may remember, she was here a couple weeks ago. She's one of our joint venture partners. Amazing job. So I'm very confident that you're going to get a lot out of today. So look, I'm not gonna hold up any longer. I'm just gonna go ahead and turn it over to you, Catherine. You've got controls and you're all ready to go. Yeah.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you. I'll just share my screen. Hope it goes okay. Okay.
I'll turn off my cam there.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Patrick. And as Patrick said, my presentation this evening is about visualization. And I realize that there are coaches here and there are therapists here. So please probably know as much, if not more, than I do about visualization. So I hope I'm not just telling you a lot of stuff that you already know. I hope you do actually get something out of it. So basically, I thought it would be good to take a look at visualization and how we might use it to our benefit, both in our daily lives and when using the One Source system. And if we just take a look at a definition of it, this is just a straightforward dictionary definition of visualization, that it is the formation of a mental image of something in its most simple definition. And for most of us, I expect, our education encouraged us to value the thinking part of our minds over the imaging part of our minds. I'm sure things have changed now. I was at school a very long time ago. But subjects like art were kind of viewed as lightweight. And, you know, you would hear about children being described as daydreamers and with negative connotations attached to it. And this is such a great shame, because we have been given the capacity as human beings to both think and imagine for a reason. And in fact, language is only around 10,000 years old. Now, you know, it's said that, you know, inventions are generally conceived in the imagination first, and that makes total sense. And Albert Einstein said that he would visualize beams of light and other matter to better understand their behavior. And apparently, imaginings informed his development of the theory of relativity. Now, this definition of the imagination comes from Martin Rossmann, from his book Guide to Imagery for Self-Healing. And Martin Rossmann is a qualified doctor who's also trained in acupuncture and psychotherapy. And he, you know, his book title shows how he uses imagery. So he uses it to help people actually heal their body. And Martin Rossmann says that imagination is the interface between the conscious and the unconscious minds. And when we refer to the unconscious mind, we simply mean that which is not our conscious awareness at any particular time. So amongst other things, it's a kind of storage area of the mind where we hold information about how to run our patterns, you know, what our beliefs are, our values, how we do things like drive a car. And if we bear Dr. Osman's definition of the imagination in mind, it is through the use of the imagination that we can impress on this part of the mind new ideas, patterns and beliefs and actions and so on. And by doing so, they will start to filter through into our conscious behaviour and awareness. Now, in Think and Grow Rich, which we're all familiar with to some degree or another, particularly in chapter 12, Napoleon Hill refers to the unconscious mind, or he calls it the subconscious mind, and he says there is plenty of evidence to support the belief that the subconscious mind is the connecting link between the finite mind of man and infinite intelligence. Well, whether you believe that or not, saying in that chapter and in the book is that by mixing desire with the imagination, we can impress our goals on the subconscious mind. And we sometimes also refer to the unconscious mind as the deeper mind. And I think that this is a useful way to think of it. So things that are impressed on the deeper mind will have a stronger effect on us. And as we've already talked about, one of the most useful ways to do that is through the use of the imagination, through the formation of mental images, if we go back to that definition. So what we may not realise is that we are making images in our minds all the time. So, for example, when you think about creating a meal, you make some kind of image of it. When you think about picking up a child from school, you make some kind of image. When you think about making a phone call, you make some kind of image. And these may be impression-like, they may be very subliminal, they may be no more than flashes, but nevertheless, they occur. And these images can be either positive and helpful and give us good feelings, or they can be the opposite. And we say in hypnotherapy, for those of you who don't know, I'm a hypnotherapist, that anxiety and worry is a misuse of the imagination, that we are imagining negative outcomes and worst case scenarios. But when we talk about the imagination and visualization, we're not just referring to making pictures. And this is why some people say they can't visualize, because they think it means making a tangible picture. But the truth is that the imagination and visualization, therefore, makes use of all the senses. So it includes seeing, hearing, tasting, smelling, feeling, so that's either through touch or internal feelings. Because the truth is that we're not all blessed to be able to create really good pictures, really clear pictures. It may be that we have another sense which is more easily accessible to us, such as the auditory, hearing, or kinesthetic, touch or feeling. And personally, I'm more attuned to the kinesthetic sense. But we can, through practice, enhance those senses that are less easily available to us. And when we are visualizing, as we shall see later on, we will benefit, and our visualizations will be more useful when we employ as many of the senses as we possibly can. So at this stage, we're going to just do a little practical exercise. So what I'd like you to do is to just make yourself comfortable in your chair. And we're going to just do a little visualization. It's one that some of you may be familiar with already. So just make yourself comfortable in your chair and just feel your feet on the floor, your hands resting wherever they are in your lap, on the arms of the chair. And just begin to focus on your breathing. Just feel the breath come in and go out. Just letting the out breath be a nice long out breath, breathing out the day as you do so. And what I'd like you to do now is to imagine that you are standing or you're in your kitchen. You could, of course, be sitting in your kitchen or in the kitchen of someone you know. And you're in front of a cutting board. And next to the cutting board is a good, sharp knife. So take a few moments to imagine the kitchen, the colour of the countertops, the appliances, the cupboards. Notice if there are windows, and so on. Notice any kitchen smell, sounds, like the running of a dishwasher, the hum of a refrigerator, or the sound of a clock on the wall. Take some time to notice everything using all your senses. What you see, what you hear, what you smell. And how you feel being there in that kitchen. Now imagine on the cutting board sits a plump, fresh, juicy lemon. In your mind, imagine picking up the lemon, holding it in your hand and feeling its weight and textures. Then place it back on the cutting board. And carefully cut it in half with the knife. Feel the resistance to the knife and how it gives way as the lemon splits. Notice the pale yellow of the pulp, the whiteness of the inner peel. And see whether you've cut through a seed or two. Now carefully cut one of the halves in two. And notice where a drop or two of juice have hurled on the surface of one of the quarters. Now imagine lifting this lemon wedge to your mouth, smelling the sharp, fresh scent. And now bite into the sour, juicy pulp. And then when you're ready, you can open your eyes. Well, I don't know how you will have felt biting into that lemon, but that little exercise would just give you perhaps some idea of maybe what your strongest sense is for visualizing. And there is a book that some of you may have heard of called The Intention Experiment, and it's written by a lady called Lynn McTaggart, who is herself a scientist. And in that book, The Intention Experiment, she describes how the boxer Muhammad Ali would prepare for a fight. And he would practice the fight in his head beforehand. And McTaggart states in that book that before a fight with Joe Frazier, this included imagining the fatigue in his legs, the sweat pouring off his body, the pain in his kidneys and bruises on his face, the flash of photographers, the exultant screams of the crowd, even the moment the referee lifted his arm in victory against Frazier. So that's quite some visualization. And in that short description, you can see that Ali used pretty much all the senses. Taste isn't mentioned, but I wouldn't be at all surprised that if he didn't also taste the salt of the sweat on his upper lip. And visualization has long been used by sports people as part of the method by which they hone their skills. Sometimes this kind of visualization is called mental rehearsal. Mental rehearsal of an activity is shown by EEG evidence, that's electroencephalogram evidence, to activate the neural pathways for the performance of an activity just as surely as engaging in the real thing. And there have been lots of experiments with this. Quite a famous one that some of you may be familiar with is of a team of basketball players, and a third of them were told to practice shooting goals in putting the ball into the basket for a week. Another few of them were told not to practice at all, and the rest of them were told to go nowhere near a basketball, but just to practice shooting nets in their imagination. And then at the end of the week, it was found that those who had practiced shooting nets in their imagination were almost as good as those who'd actually practiced it. So that's an example of that, laying down the neural connections for an activity. And yeah, so that's what Muhammad Ali was doing. So we're going to do another little exercise that will lead us into the next section of my presentation. So what I'd like you to do again is to just close your eyes once more and make yourself comfortable. Just feeling yourself in your seat. And what I'd like you to do now is to just think of something you did today, some little event. It could be having breakfast, making a phone call, having a conversation with somebody, something that's pretty neutral. So no difficult conversations or arguments with people, just something pretty neutral that's quite short that you did today. And when you've chosen what that is, I want you to just run it through from beginning to end in your mind. And I'll just give you a couple of minutes to do that. Okay. So you can open your eyes again. And we're going to come back to that little exercise in a couple of minutes. So basically, there are really two main ways to visualize. Either by observing what happens, so as if you were seeing it on a film, something like that. And the second way is by actually feeling as if you are participating in the visualization. And both of these forms of visualization have their value, they have their uses. So what I want you to do is to just think about that activity that you just visualized and just recall whether you were observing that activity, so you watched yourself doing it just now, or whether you felt that you were kind of reliving it, so you didn't see yourself doing anything, you felt as if you were actually carrying out the activity and you saw other people or whatever else was involved. So these two modes we can use to our advantage. And if you saw the event from the outside, so you saw yourself engaged in the activity, we can say that you experienced that visualization in a dissociated way. You were outside of it. If when you visualize that activity, you did it as if you were in it, so you were seeing out of your own eyes, you couldn't see yourself, you were visualizing in what we call an associated way. Now, when we visualize in a dissociated way, from a dissociated perspective, this gives us the opportunity to take a more objective, neutral stance. And this approach to visualization is useful if we want to observe something. So maybe we want to observe how we behave in a particular situation, or how other people behave, or we want to see the details of a situation, or we've decided that we want to change the way we behave in a certain situation, and we want to see ourselves behaving in that way before we decide whether we want to take it on or not. And then associated visualization, where we are visualizing as if we're actually engaged in the activity, is good for things like getting in touch with a goal and developing it. We're going to come back to these, by the way, with examples. So I'm just giving you some pointers at the moment. So it's good for getting in touch with the goal and developing it. Maybe we've practiced a new behavior from a dissociated perspective, and we want to see how it feels to actually behave in that way. If we want to build a strong desire for something, or we want to bed down maybe a new behavior in the unconscious mind, it's also useful for that. So if we visualize something from an associated perspective, as if we're in it, we would tend to feel it more. And when we visualize something from a dissociated perspective, so we're standing outside it, then we will tend to feel more neutral about it. So there are many things that we can use visualization for. And I thought today that it might be useful just to look at 4 ways in which you could use visualization. You may be using visualization anyway, but the first one, of course, as we've already referred to some degree, is developing a skill. So if we think back to Muhammad Ali, when he rehearsed his fights in his head, he was developing the neural connections that we talked about. So he was building the physical skill in his body, but he was also conveying to his unconscious mind that he was going to behave in a way that would make him a winner. At least that was his intention. And just to give a slightly different example, some years ago, I was reading a hypnotherapist's website, and he said that he applied visualization to his 10-pin bowling skills, which he said were quite mediocre. So he would visualize himself regularly being able to knock down all 10 pins. And he said at first, nothing happened. And then one day he was at the bowling alley, or 10-pin bowling alley, and he bowled the ball. As he began to bowl the ball down the alley, he felt his arm shift its position, and then he knocked all 10 pins down. So basically, his unconscious mind was making the necessary adjustments to give him what he'd visualized that he wanted. And, the sports profession, the athletics profession has long used visualization for this very reason, not just to develop physical skills, but also to lay down the mental strength needed to be a top-level athlete. So if you practice a sport, I know practicing your golfing strokes in visualization is a very common way that people use visualization to develop a skill. But if for sports or, playing the piano or anything like that, visualization can help you with laying down those skills. Personally, I just another kind of way that I've used it myself. A couple of years ago, I was out of commission for a few months, and as well as being a hypnotherapist, I do oriental face therapy, and I hadn't done any face treatments for a while, so I visualized myself giving a treatment. So from an associated perspective, so it was like I could just see my hands in order to kind of just pull out that information of how to do it from the unconscious mind. And then if we move on to reviewing the day, and I think this is a great way to use visualization. So in this approach, you would be replaying the events of the day, and you could do this using the dissociated approach, so almost seeing it as if it were on a film. And then when you replay your day and there's something that you would have liked to have gone differently, you would have liked to have dealt with something differently or behaved differently in a certain situation, then you can use your imagination to replay it in the way that you would have preferred to have dealt with it, or the way that you would have preferred to have behaved. And then you can step into it and imagine doing that in an associated way. And again, this is just a good way of laying down a kind of blueprint in the unconscious mind that it's a preferred way of behaving in such a situation. And some years ago, I had a young woman come to see me about something. It was nothing to do with this. But in the course of conversation, she said that, she'd recently started this job and she wasn't sure of the standard of her work, whether, it was good enough. So I suggested to her that she do this, that she review the day and that she could replay bits where she felt she would have preferred to have done it differently. And she came back the next time I saw her, she said that she had indeed been doing that. And what had happened for her was that she realized that actually there were quite a few things that she did well. And so it enhanced her confidence in her ability to do that particular job. And similarly, I gave this exercise to someone else to do. And by doing that, she realized that actually she spent a lot of time on her own and perhaps too much, and she decided to do something about it. So, as we said earlier about using the imagination and connecting with the unconscious mind, not just to lay down these kind of new blueprints, but also because we're connecting in with the unconscious, we're also connecting with, the other attributes of the unconscious and our resources as well. And so, we can get useful information and kind of tap into our inner guidance on things. And then the third suggestion I have is preparing for an event. So I use this quite frequently with people who want to stop smoking. And I used it the other day with someone who wants to stop drinking alcohol because she was drinking far too much. And one of the things I did with her was to get her to mentally rehearse going out with different friends and other things, where other times when she would be tempted to drink too much alcohol. And it was really interesting because, very simple, but throughout it she was smiling. And at the end she said that she realized how much more present she was without the alcohol, how much more present for her friends, and how she was more than capable of being somewhere without an alcoholic drink. So again, that's the unconscious mind, tapping into the resources through that kind of visualization. So you could use it for all sorts of events. So you could visualize a meeting going well, or a phone call going well, or a holiday going well, a first date going well, asking for a raise, these kinds of things. And also I think that a good way to use it is, visualizing a happy outcome to a knotty problem. So in this sort of situation, I would briefly outline the problem in my mind, and then visualize something that would indicate that the problem was solved. And this is really beginning to tap into the unconscious mind. And I'm going to tell you another story. So there was to illustrate this. So there was a man who had a dream. He dreamt that he was in the jungle, and there were the locals, many locals around him who had spears, and they were approaching him quite threateningly, and they were doing this with their spears. And when they got close to him, he saw that each of the spears had a hole near the tip. The man who had that dream was called Elias Howe, and he was the inventor of the sewing machine. He didn't know how to make it sew until he had that dream, told him he needed to put a hole near the tip of the needle to make it sew. So you can imagine that by, Elias Howe, by going over and over, this particular problem, and perhaps seeing the sewing machine actually sewing, his unconscious mind, through a dream, gave him the solution. And I absolutely love that story. So, of course, we've talked about using it to prepare for different events. And you might say, well, I can't change someone else's behavior. And of course, that's absolutely true. But the thing is that by visualizing how you'd like things to go, you are priming your mind with a different expectation. And because of that, you will tend to behave in a way that might lead you to that kind of the outcome that you want. And you know how it is when we perhaps behave differently, then the other person often behaves differently as well. So you are in effect potentially influencing the other person through your own behaviour, and I think we can think of loads of examples of that being the case. And then finally, developing a goal. And of course, this is the use of visualization we're probably the most familiar with. We want something, and say you've got a business, you've got a new business or something like that, and you might want to use visualization to focus on building a successful business, or building the success of that business. And in this situation, I would suggest that you write down your visualization before you actually do it. So in that kind of scenario, you could say, for example, you imagined happy customers who, let you know by their behavior towards you that they were happy. Perhaps you receive emails and phone calls from them, and you see your client base increasing. And I read of a man who did exactly that. First thing in the morning, he would go and visualize himself being able to help his clients, being able to give them what they needed, and that he attributed the building of his business to that visualization. And I'm sure that part of the reason for that was that by seeing himself actually able to help people with his service or product, whatever it was, that he influenced his own level of confidence and sense of his abilities. And okay, so another kind of goal would be perhaps wanting to be fit and healthy. I think this is quite a common goal. We could imagine, for example, seeing ourselves wearing an article of clothing we haven't been able to wear for a while, something like that. Seeing our toned muscles and on our arms and legs. We could hear our friends, our partner commenting on how good we look. We could imagine feeling the health and vitality in our bodies and hearing the thoughts that go along with that. So, we can use these visualizations for all kinds of goals. And the thing about visualizing a goal in this way is that, several things could happen. So first of all, you will tend to get clearer on what you want. The unconscious mind, as we've already said, will get involved, and you may find that you refine your goal as new information seems to float into your awareness. You'll become aware of your own feelings about achieving that goal. So you could come across attitudes and behaviors, for example, that could be standing in your way, that require your attention. If you visualize your goal, but you feel yourself kind of not terribly engaged in it or pulling away, then that's information for you that, perhaps something needs attending to. And you may begin to notice resources in the outside world that can help you. We have something called the reticular activating system, which is like our mind's GPS system. So it's a goal-oriented part of the mind. And I think we've all had that experience of focusing on something and then seeing all sorts of resources that can be useful to us. So these are just some everyday examples of ways that we can use visualization. But how can we use it perhaps even more effectively within the One Source system? So Patrick has in the past mentioned to us visualizing the content of our purpose statements every time you read it or say it to yourself. And I think this is a great way to use visualization. And getting associated into it would be a good way to go with this, because then you're really building that the sense of being engaged with it. We could also build visualizations for each of the key areas. You know, where you want to be with each of these areas. For example, say in relationships, you could visualize your family being united, being happy together, being supportive with each other. You could imagine your relationship with your partner being loving and mutually supportive and beneficial. So, you know, really we can use visualization very effectively within each of the key areas. And I think also that a good way to use it is for those items in our key areas where that are a bit tricky for us. And I think we all have those. So, you know, for example, perhaps it's making time to exercise. So, you know, what about something like, you know, you're visualizing yourself at your computer and seeing the time on the clock, and you decide it's the end of your working day, and you visualize yourself switching off the computer, putting on your workout gear and going outside or getting on your exercise bike, whatever it might be. So again, sort of those areas that we might struggle with a bit more, the visualization can just kind of bring them more into our awareness and perhaps make them easier for us to engage in as a result. And then, of course, 30-day goals and 90-day goals, seeing those goals achieved, and you know, both with the 30-day goals and the 90-day goals, having that that visualization of the end result. And the thing with these kinds of visualizations is, you know, to do them frequently. So, you know, make a habit of spending a few minutes every day on some visualization. And in that way, the unconscious mind starts to get the message of what you want to achieve in, you know, whether it's the key areas, your 30-day goals or your 90-day goals. And finally, another idea that might be of interest to you is the idea of visualizing your day ahead. So you could do this lying in bed before you even get up in the morning. Seeing yourself going through your day from beginning to end, those things that you know are going to take place, seeing them going well, seeing yourself getting to the end of the day and having that sense of having had a good day. So that's another possibility there. So to conclude then, the uses of visualization are as varied as your imagination can devise. You may find that you have a particular sense that seems stronger than the others, but that doesn't matter. Just try and develop the other senses as well. Include as many of the senses as you can whenever you're visualizing, particularly with associated visualization. And remember that because the imagination is the interface between the conscious and the unconscious minds, that as well as impressing on the unconscious mind what you want, you're tapping into your resources, you're tapping into those resources you have that are, stored away in the unconscious mind that are available to you, and visualization can help to bring those out so that you develop visualizations, you feel confident about doing things, you get ideas and even answers, as we've seen from some of the examples. So that brings me to the end of my presentation, and I hope you got something from it and can make use of it. And if you want to ask me anything, you can email me. This is my email address, kathchadwick@yahoo.co.uk, and I'd be happy to give you any help I can. Thank you.
Amazing. Fantastic. Catherine, once again, another really insightful, informative presentation. Really got a lot out of that. With me personally, that's a subject that's very dear to my heart. I'm extremely big on visualization. You just reminded me of actually a little bit of a story, actually, how I use visualization, and actually how everything that we're doing right now was kind of envisioned before it actually became turned into the OneSource personal development network. Several years ago, I was commuting back and forth to Dublin, and I live maybe an hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes from Dublin. And I took a contract. I was doing some work there, and I just started thinking about how I could actually turn this into a business. And at the time, I was going through a lot of different. I was doing a lot of different, attending different seminars, different small groups, talks, all on personal development. And I just started imagining what it would be like if I was there, and how I would talk about. At the time, I referred to it as the Code of Three. How would I talk about the Code of Three, and how would I present it? And I just started to visualize it on my drive to Dublin and on my drive back. And I can tell you so much of that visualization is part of what we do right now. It's part of it. The entire session on focus all came 100%, I'd say, almost from that from that visualization. But myself, I'm a big believer in it. So yeah, I hope everybody took it, got something out of it, and took plenty of notes, and really took it serious, because it's such a big part of what we do. And especially when you're working with yourself, when you're working with others, as Catherine says, when you're setting goals, the concept of visualizing your day ahead of time, that's another really good technique I would encourage everyone to do. So look, fantastic presentation, really got a lot out of it. Thank you so much. I appreciate it, as I'm sure everybody else does as well. So look, guys, we'll go ahead and we'll wrap it up. Thanks again to everybody for attending. And questions, comments, concerns, Catherine gave you her email address. Don't be shy. Make sure that you drop her a message, or just drop her a quick message and tell her how much you appreciated the presentation and what you got out of it. I'm sure she'd love to hear it, as well as myself. So look, we'll see you all very soon. Okay. And thanks very much for coming. All right. Have a great night, everybody. All the best. Thanks again, Catherine. Bye-bye.